After 3 years of living with COVID-19, the only thing the public's been fully immunized against is what they're being told by the voices of public authority.
We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
Well, that's not true. We have not had 100,000 children in serious condition in U.S. hospitals. According to the CDC,
The COVID pandemic is changing many behavioral patterns, but one of the biggest, for which we should thank the virus, is the death of official certitude.
When should I get tested? Why can't I find a test? Do I need to isolate 10 days, 5 days, or even at all?
The way this administration rolled out boosters was a disaster. You created skepticism and mass confusion.
By now, the public has been left numb, with few believing what politicians or the CDC say about COVID and Omicron. The answers they give no longer add up.
Do you know how many of the 836,000 deaths in the U.S. linked to COVID are from COVID, or how many are with COVID, but they had other comorbidities? Do you have that breakdown?
Those data will be forthcoming.
My purpose isn't to discredit public authority or science. We need both. It was public authorities who cleared the regulatory path for Operation Warp Speed, which let private sector scientists develop protective vaccines.
No political interference, no bureaucracy, no red tape. It's been just an incredible, visionary approach.
My intention is to resurrect the idea of intellectual modesty, a necessary virtue that looks altogether lost to public life and its scientific representatives.
What happened during this pandemic is that many politicians outsourced their responsibility to the public to public health people.
Including Donald Trump.
Including Donald Trump. And the consequence of that is that the normal checks that would allow you to say, well, the politician made a good choice or not, have been offloaded to a set of people who have no checks at all.
The weaponization of science accelerated with the arrival of COVID, but it began with the battle over climate policy.
Climate legislation is infrastructure legislation.
Disputes among scientists can be intense, but at some point in the last decade, the impatient proponents of climate change enlisted the media to suppress dissent.
You're an expert on modeling, scientific modeling, and of course the models are what drive a lot of the predictions. How credible do you think those models are, and how much uncertainty exists in those models?
There's a lot of uncertainty in the models, and unfortunately, the uncertainty is growing as the models become more sophisticated with each generation.
Social media companies such as Facebook have tried to suppress the objections of scientists and authors like Stephen Koonin. But dissent, perhaps the most honorable of political traditions, is being demoted into oblivion as, quote, misinformation.
There's a reason why it's called COP26. There's been 25 of them before that. We've actually been doing this charade, if you will, for 30 years now. And the UN did a surprisingly honest appraisal of the last decade of climate impacts. What they said was, despite we've had the Paris Agreement and we've had 10 years of talks, we can't tell the difference between the world we're actually in and a world where we hadn't done anything about climate since 2005.
Science is about progress, but it cannot be progress if a significant portion of the population believes that what scientists are telling them about climate and COVID is mostly, to pick a word, disinformation.
Every day you appear on TV, you do more damage than good when it comes to educating the public on COVID.
During the pandemic, too many scientists have aligned themselves with the authoritarians of certitude.
The anger that's developed with you, Dr. Fauci, is that you don't want to give us advice. You want to tell us what to do.
The confusions multiplying around the Omicron variant mean people will continue to disbelieve what they're told to do until serious dissent gets more respect.
The idea that our entire social life can be upended by essentially a relatively narrow set of scientists, a narrow set of public health people, we have to build protections against that clearly in our political systems.